Okay, that looks like we're good. Okay, awesome. Okay, everybody. So my name is Cheryl Durwin, and I'm from the Department of Psychology. I teach a course, a master's course in our Master of Arts program called Thesis Seminar. And so let me stop seeing that transcription because that's going to drive me crazy. Okay. And so my students just completed the course. It's a prep course before they start their master's thesis proposal. And so I'd just like to share with you an overview of theses and dissertations and how to get started from start to finish. And you all might be in various stages. So definitely, ask away as we go through and use examples from your, own experiences, and I'll try to do the same thing. Okay, so we have one thesis and two dissertations, correct? Yes.
Right.
Okay. All right. All right. So the general outline, well, not that we need to accomplish it all, but what's the difference between a thesis and dissertation? Finding and refining your topics. So some of you might already have topics. It seems like some of you do. What are strong research questions? How do you go about doing that? What's in a thesis and dissertation? What are the components that you are building as you go along? I won't say too much about designing a research methodology, but because that varies by discipline, so I'd like to hear from other disciplines to see what you all do, and then just a few tips on getting organized as well, some tricks that we've come across over the years. Okay, so what's a thesis and what's a dissertation? So in our program, we only have a Master of Arts program, and so we deal with master's theses. Theses are an in-depth topic. They expand on an existing literature, and they try to answer a new question. So in my thesis seminar course, we try to get the students to understand that what they're looking for is a gap in the research literature, right? Something that not necessarily hasn't been done at all before, although that could be the case, but generally something that hasn't been thoroughly addressed by the literature, or maybe there are limitations in the literature, something that you can really tweak and expand on. So for example, I have one student who decided to do a thesis on gendered AI instruction. And so that's something pretty unique. We're all kind of becoming familiar with artificial intelligence in various forms. And so what she was interested in is whether the voice of the AI instructor, male or female voice, has a difference in terms of perceived effectiveness and just effective instruction. So that's definitely a gap that really hasn't been done before. So it's a huge gap. But you could also just pick something that there are limitations in the literature, something that hasn't been fully addressed that you want to take and then explore from there. So so that's what the thesis is finding that little piece. I like to tell my students that I think of the research literature as a giant puzzle, right? And so we never know all of the pieces of the puzzle, but we're building the puzzle piece by piece. So what you're looking for is what is your piece of the puzzle that you're adding to the literature. So the dissertations are a little bit longer, obviously. They also try to answer a unique research question as well to address that gap, but they're really unique in the sense that you're trying to solve a theoretical or a practical problem. So making an even more significant contribution to the literature than a master's thesis does. So something really unique in that sense. Timeline, okay, for each of those, it's about a year. Sometimes you take a little bit more for your dissertation, but for the master's thesis, usually it's a fall, spring timeline, or it can be done spring, fall as well. But your first semester is the proposal, where you're developing the literature review and the methodology. In some fields, that's called Chapter 1 and Chapter 2. And then you're preparing for your thesis proposal defense in the spring semester or your second semester for the thesis or the actual dissertation, data collection in some respects, and writing up the results and discussion, typically chapter 3 and 4, although chapters are sometimes organized differently by different disciplines, and then preparing for your defense. In a little bit, we'll talk about feasibility. Okay, so how to select a topic that's feasible. But I thought I'd just stop here for a moment and see if there are any things you want to contribute, so far in terms of examples of dissertation topics or thesis topics.
For me, I think for the capstone, it's all done in one semester.
Mm-hmm.
Would that be the case?
It could be according to your program. I don't know for sure. So you could do that in one semester, sure. It's a little bit more intensive, but definitely doable. In your discipline, do you
Yeah, it's
need to
funny. I
collect
have to look
data?
into it. When my son did a capstone, he did it over 2 semesters.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll check with my, but I'm not sure, but something I need to look into.
Do you, in your discipline, do you go about is there data collection involved?
It's a Master of Library and Information Science, but I see that I'll check into it. I have to I think it's just 3 credits for the capstone, or maybe it's
Okay.
6. That might be fall and spring, or spring and fall. So I'll check into that again.
Yeah, definitely. We'll be talking a little bit about the differences in theses and dissertations between STEM and social sciences and the humanities. And so I'm not really sure where library and information sciences falls. And
Yeah,
the distinctions aren't very clear as well. But if it falls more into the humanities, it could very well, be just a one semester type of
yeah,
experience. Yeah.
yeah.
So definitely check with your thesis advisor or program coordinator to see. Timeline and feasibility is a really big factor that we'll talk
Right.
about. Tess,
The
did you want to add
university
something?
has policies so that if you don't finish up in that time frame, you won't fail out or anything. You'll get an incomplete, and you'll be able to continue to work on it after the set time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep, that's a good point. Any other thoughts for so far? Okay. Alrighty, lost my mouse. There we go. Okay, selecting a topic. So what I tell students is you have um, two ingredients, right? Passion. Oh, I lost my. There we go. Passion. All right. So selecting a topic. You need to have passion. Okay. And this is something that was advice that was passed down to me from my doctoral advisor that I passed down to students. You have to pick a topic that you're really super interested in, that you love, that you have a passion for, because even if you do love it, by the end of the entire process, you're going to be sick of it. So you have to kind of have that passion that will keep you motivated and get you through. So that's number one. And then you have to have a strategy. Okay, so strategy, look at what other faculty are doing. If you don't have a topic already, what are faculty doing in your program? That can be some good guidance. Read, right? Read a lot. So you might have a general idea. We're going to talk about that next, like what's the big idea that you have and then how to narrow it down. You have to read. And the reason is that if you can't ask good questions unless you have background knowledge, right? So once you find a topic and find a passion, you're going to be asking yourself some questions. What causes me to lose track of time that I want to research more, right? Do we have a solution to something? Can I find how to solve something? What is the effect of something? And that's what we generally use in psychology a lot, dealing with independent and dependent variables. What is the effect of this variable on, various outcomes, right? So ask yourself lots of questions and then kind of dig into the literature a little bit, because you have to have some background knowledge in order to then formulate some questions, right? So what's your passion and what's your strategy? Okay. Easier said than done. And what I'm going to mention next is everything starts out fuzzy, and that's okay. So I spend the first couple of weeks of the semester in my thesis seminar course talking students off the ledge, right? They're very anxious that they have this very fuzzy topic and they don't see how it will ever become a thesis. And I say, don't worry, right? It's a very fuzzy, lump of clay. I've been on the journey before, as your faculty advisors have, and I know how to get you to the end point. So trust me and trust in the process. So I think you have to kind of just trust that there is a process, and it's okay if it starts out really, really fuzzy. Okay, so you start with an idea. So a couple of resources that I use. I won't spend too much time showing you these, but I can provide these resources as well. There's a couple of resources for narrowing down a topic, and I use these in our thesis seminar uh, course. So let me see if I can, this one might work. Okay, so this is a PDF that I found that I use in my course. So you start with a broad topic. What's your topic? You try to narrow it down a little bit. You brainstorm and ask yourself a lot of questions. And then from there, you ask some potential research questions. And right here is where I try to get my students to then use these research questions to go and do some database searches. They start out in week 2 of the semester, just doing some database searches, seeing what's out there so that they can start reading. Just like we said, you need that strategy to kind of read in those general areas to figure out, where's the gap, what's doable, where's my passion, where do I want to follow that? So it's a neat little worksheet. And the other one, the online website, has a similar type of worksheet. And so I can provide that for you all.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's narrowing down a topic. Does anybody have a topic already that you want to share? Yeah.
Well, in the Masters of Library Information Science, there's an organization that's called the Middletown Library Service Center in Middletown, Connecticut, and they augment public libraries and school libraries. And what I would like to look into, well, they also might be getting cut because of federal funding, because part of their funding is federal, so long saga. But anyway, I may start comparing how much of their services are used by different schools and different libraries. For instance, if you're a high school librarian and you want to have a book club, you can get 20 books for them for free delivered to your local library, and you can, without any expenses. So I've got to look into who's using the services of this organization in Middletown, Connecticut, and to what extent. So, that might be the data collection point. So I don't know, but I'm pretty sure I want to do that topic because it's a valuable asset. They also help those who are blind and who have low vision, and those with dyslexia and hearing impaired. So they augment learning.
Yeah, absolutely. So I do hear, a topic in that, right? And so it seems like you've already narrowed it down, which is great. Yeah. So wonderful. Anyone else? Yeah. Anyone else want to share?
Yeah,
I'm not ready. No,
that's okay. Sorry. No, that's fine. Big idea? Do you have a big idea?
My big idea, I work in I'm getting my degree in therapeutic recreation, so I'm interested in memory care and caregivers. I have a son with intellectual disability and developmental delay. And I know, like, when I left him at his group home, it was hard. So when family members leave their family in memory care, it's difficult to just walk away and accept that, that's where they're going to be safe and that's like the best place for them.
Yeah.
So something in that direction, like caregiving.
Yeah. Okay. That's a big topic. That's great. And I know I've kind of recently just gone through that, myself. So you start with that big topic and then you do a little bit of reading on that, right? And then you kind of narrow it down from there and do a little bit more reading, and then you'll find that niche for sure, because what you're gonna be asking yourself is like, well, where do I go from there, right?
Right.
If you're interested in the caregivers, like, what about them, right? Is it the effect on their mental health, emotional well-being, right? There are lots of different things that you can look at. So you have your big topic, right? And you can start reading and then figuring out, like, where's the next path. So you're farther along than you thought. So for sure. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
And for me, my topic is on examining the unique mental health challenges of non-binary and gender expansive Black men.
Mm-hmm.
Because and looking at the research, there is not much research on trans and non-binary individuals, much less people of color. And so to look at, how their mental health is impacted by identity management, but also through cross-cultural aspects as well.
Yeah, awesome. Now that obviously you're farther along, right? And so that's very, very specific. Do you have a sense of, can you share with others like where you started? How did you come upon that particular topic? Was it always that clear, or did you have this just general idea?
So it was not always this clear, no. It was a lot of, I feel like, discussions with my advisor,
Hmm.
as well as things that I would be interested in writing about. So it was more of a broader thing because initially when I started my doctorate program, I wanted to focus on mentorship programs.
Hmm.
And so it was very broad, very general. And then that's where I then began to explore, aspects of non-binary and gender expensive because it's how I identify. And
Hmm.
so getting to realize when I was looking at a lot of the research, I didn't see much about non-binary Black men. And so that's where it was born out of.
Right. Okay. That's awesome. It's almost like the light bulb goes off, right? When you're reading, you're
Yeah,
like, hey, okay, I don't see very much on this, right?
yeah.
And I like the fact that you said, with your advisor, you had those conversations, right? That's important as well, right? The advisor's knowledgeable in the general area. And so, reading and having those conversations can kind of bring you to that area where then that light bulb goes off. So it's a really great example. Yeah. Okay. Any other thoughts before we keep going? No? Okay, great. All right. Okay, so just putting that up there. Now we can't talk about, specifically about developing strong research questions. It's going to be specific to everyone's discipline. But some things that you want to keep in mind. Has the research been done already, right? And so I think that's a really good example that you brought up, right? About your doctoral research, like it hasn't been done already, right? So you can develop a
Mhm.
very strong research question. Um, it also kind of illustrates the gap, right? That's truly a gap in the literature that we don't know, right? And just to go back again to the point I made earlier, the gap doesn't need to be something that hasn't been investigated at all. It just means that it's maybe not fully investigated or not investigated in the same way that you want to look at it, or you want to address limitations that are in the literature. So you have to kind of find that gap. That's going to make a strong research question. Um, you could potentially do a replication of research. That's a possibility, where you can replicate some previous research in the literature and maybe just kind of extend that. But typically we look for that very unique niche. And then work with your advisor to make sure it's feasible. That's going to make it a strong research question. This is the practicality part of it. For example, do you have access to a sample, right? So I do educational research, and sometimes students will say, well, I want to do some type of educational question, and I will ask them, do you have access to a sample? Because it's really hard to get into schools. So you don't want to, go into schools or hospitals or, places where you are going to have difficulty getting the sample. That's going to make it last longer, right? And so we talked about that timeline. So it could be a really strong, interesting research question, but if you can't get access to the sample, then, you're going to find difficulty and not be able to finish the thesis or dissertation. So sample is one. Do you have the resources that you need? So if you're doing data collection, do you need equipment? Are you going to pay participants? Do you have the resources? Do you need to apply for funding to get the resources? All of those types of things are important. And most importantly, can the data be collected within a couple of months? okay, the feasibility, right? So a strong research question is going to allow you to answer that question, but in a reasonable amount of time. We don't want you here for a long period of time, right? And as we discussed before, you could take longer if you need to. It's not the end of the world, and students do that. You take an incomplete in your thesis section, your course. But you don't want to drag it out for a long period of time. So can you collect that data within a reasonable amount of time? Okay, because we'd like you to finish within that year's time, or potentially the semester if it's a semester capstone experience. Okay, so I mean we can talk at length about how to develop a strong research question, but it's not the purpose that we're kind of going into today. But those are some key points to think about. Okay, as we go through. Okay, thoughts on that? Good. All right, awesome. Okay. Features of a thesis or dissertation in the different areas. Again, just to kind of show you what are we talking about with theses and dissertations. The structure and features of a thesis or dissertation are generally similar for STEM areas and social sciences. So I'm in psychology, so we're in the social sciences here. We border on the STEM, so we're kind of like right here. And what we do is we ask questions that are tested through hypotheses, much like in the STEM areas. We use this type of structure, which many of you might be familiar with, an introduction, method section, results, discussion section. And so those end up being your chapters. Sometimes there are, instead of 4 chapters, 5 chapters. It could be introduction, literature review, is sometimes a separate chapter 2, and then method is chapter 3, results are chapter 4, discussion 5. So it's sometimes four chapters or 5, depending on your discipline. But STEM and social sciences kind of work the same way. In social sciences, we use a lot more theory than in the STEM. So I teach my students that not only do you need to have a strong research question, but it has to be based on theory, right? There should be some theoretical basis to what you're researching. So I think definitely I think I heard counselor education, and what were some of the other ones, areas? I forget now, but those definitely are still, would draw on theory for sure. In the humanities, they deal a little bit differently. I'm not going to, proclaim to be an expert in this area, but it's a little less data-driven, more narrative type of argument, and using lots of different artifacts to develop their thesis. So they engage in a lot of theoretical exploration, but not a lot of, hard data the way the STEM and the social sciences do. Okay, so that's just kind of like the way they're structured. What I really wanted to look into is showing you a little bit about what's in the thesis and dissertation if we look at STEM and social sciences at least, right? So I like to use this graphic a lot in my classes. So we have the literature review that starts out very broad. You start with the broad issue. The broad issue is your what is the big picture? That's what I call it. I go, what's the big picture, that you're starting with, and why is it important? Okay, so I actually, we want to look a little
would
bit
that
deep.
be your goal then?
Yeah, so the big picture is your goal. Like what do you intend to, solve or investigate, right? And what is it within the context, right, of your discipline, right? So what is your goal within the context of the discipline? That's the background and why it's important. Yeah, absolutely. I call this like the so what effect, right? Because you could have a really interesting topic, right, that you want to explore. But if it doesn't situate within, a broader theoretical context, practical context, educational context, right? So we want it contextualized so that we can, tell the reader, tell the world, this is why this research question is important. So that's your goal within the broader context. So you're building that background, telling them why it's important. And then you're going to go into, as you're going down the, down your pyramid here, talk about the research that's already been done. What do we know, right? And then this part here, what are you interested in? So we get narrower and narrower. Big picture context, why is it important? So what? Contextualize it within the broader context. Tell me what you know already from the research literature about the topic, right? And then we kind of, as we're narrowing down, we're getting to the point that we don't know, and that's that gap that I keep talking about. I have students end their literature review, that introduction, with a summary paragraph, right towards the bottom here, with these key questions that remain. That's the gap. What do we know? What don't we know? And then what do you propose to investigate? Okay, so that's the first part of your thesis proposal or dissertation proposal, is like bringing the reader along the journey, right? From that big picture, the broader issue, all the way down to what you want to investigate. Okay, so it's a story you're telling. Thoughts on that or questions on that? Okay, and so if we just go back to our bigger picture, right? That's the top triangle there, and that leads you right into the methodology, which is part of your thesis proposal or dissertation proposal. How do you propose to then study this phenomenon that you've research question that you've just proposed? And then the second half of the thesis or dissertation is the results and the discussion. So you're going to then analyze the data and present the results in your thesis or dissertation. And then you're going to, in your discussion, say what you found. And I like this graphic because it brings it right back to the literature review. Okay, so I tell students that the first part of your discussion section in your thesis or in your dissertation is going to be reminding the reader, where did we start from, right? What was the broader issue that we were interested in investigating, right? What did you do? What did you find? And then tying it back to the research literature. How do your results support the research literature? How do they add to the research literature? Maybe they refute some things in the research literature. So you're kind of bringing it back to that literature, and that brings it full circle. And then you're ending here at the bottom with those wider implications. So you're ending your discussion with any potential limitations of your research that you came across as you were conducting it, analyzing it, and then what are the broader implications of this research? So again, bringing it back full circle to that broad context, right? What are the educational implications? What are the theoretical implications, practical implications, or implications for future research? Maybe you answered part of the question, but limitations prevented you from fully answering your question, and then that leads to future research down the line. So we end that discussion with, here's my piece of the puzzle, but I'm going to give you some ideas for some other pieces that will add to the puzzle. Okay. All right, so I really like this graphic, okay? At least for, most STEM areas, social science areas will, follow this format and have all of these components to the thesis proposal, dissertation proposal, and then actual thesis and dissertation. Okay. Questions or thoughts?
No questions.
No questions? Okay. So you are at you have a really defined topic, and you said you're going to be starting your chapters 1, 2, and 3 before we got.
Summer.
Yeah,
Yes.
the summer. Okay. Before we started. So you are going to be researching the literature and all of that, right?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So you're right here at that top triangle. Awesome. Yep. So fun. Okay. So methodology, I'm not going to say very much, because it does vary by discipline. STEM and social sciences have a similar approach, I think, to methodology. And so this little graphic here just shows you the various components of a typical method section. We start with participants. So who are you going to be surveying or investigating and recruiting? Where are you going to get the participants? Materials and measures. So we generally have to say what materials are we using in order to collect our data, what measures. They might be psychological instruments, surveys, interviews, lots of different measures. So what measures are we using? Within that, we talk about, at least in psychology, reliability and validity of our measures. We want to make sure that the measures are really strong and valid because those lead to positive outcomes, right? So if we don't have reliable and valid measures, if we happen to get null results, we have no idea whether it was the measures that weren't really good or, something else that may have gone awry in the study. So you want to have some good measures. Outlining your procedure, right? I tell my students that is the chronological order from start to finish. What will you be asking participants to do from start to finish in an experiment, for example, or, if you're doing some type of field work, what type of activities will you be doing from start to finish all the way through the project so that someone else can come along and replicate the study by looking at exactly what you did in that chronological order, right? So you have a procedure section, and then you generally outline a typical design for the study. So in psychology, social sciences, also STEM, we might use an experimental design or a quasi-experimental design, correlational survey design. So there are various designs. And those are the general components of a method section. But again, they're going to vary depending on your discipline. All right. I would definitely ask for a sample master's thesis or a sample doctoral dissertation, from a previous student. Ask your faculty advisor for that. And those are, good models to kind of go on. Well, it used to be that we used to have them in the library, but I'm not sure if that's still the case. So. Oh, look on ProQuest. Thank you. Yeah. Yep. Because that's where we deposit them. When you're done with your thesis and dissertation, they are deposited on ProQuest. So those will give you lots of examples. Absolutely. All right. Thanks for that. Thoughts on that or questions at all? Yeah. No? Okay. Awesome. All right, then we're nearing the end. So just some tips for getting organized, and you may all have tips of your own, so you can share those with all of us as well. I sometimes recommend that my students create an annotated bibliography. Okay. That helps you organize large amounts of information when you're reading in the literature. You're going to be reading lots of different sources, artifacts, research articles. And so if you create an annotated bibliography, that will, and obviously we can do that in Word, and we can kind of organize things. So there you have all the information at your fingertips, and you can kind of organize information and keep it all in hand. So let's see if this might work, and I can show you what that looks like.
And then is there a possibility, if we finish early enough, to show us how to access ProQuest?
Sure. We can try. Absolutely. Yep. So what you're looking at here, can you see the annotated bibliography?
No, it's
Oh,
still
okay.
the
I'm sorry.
hyperlink, yeah.
So that's
It's
because
just
I'm still in
highlighted.
okay. So hang on one second. Stop sharing that for a second. I gotta move it. Okay, let's see. Here we go. Okay, so now you should see it.
Yeah.
So again, I have the sources at the end of the PowerPoint, and I'll share them all with you afterwards. So this is a guide to how to write an annotated bibliography. So it just takes you step by step. What components are in the annotated bibliography, and down here at the bottom, it just looks like an abstract almost, right? So you have your your source citation, and you give a little summary that has all of these components to it. So what was the author's purpose? What was the summary of the article or source, and your comments on how it might fit into your thesis or your dissertation, how might it be useful, and then any other comments that you want to put in there. And that way, if you keep these all in a Word file, they're all searchable, and you can then, maybe copy and paste some of these into starting to like put it into a narrative form. Okay, so I'll share that with you for sure. Okay. Okay, so where were we?
We were on annotated.
Yeah, so let's see, go back to our PowerPoint. Okay.
Uh-oh, where'd you go? There you are. And you're mute.
Okay, we're back. Back to the PowerPoint. Sharing it. I hit the wrong button, so sorry, guys.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. Okay. So yeah, you can use an annotated bibliography. You can also use Excel to organize information. So there's just a visual there of how you can create an Excel spreadsheet with the different, maybe there's your article citation, what are the aims and goals, what methodology do they use? A lot of times this is important as well. We didn't talk too much about organizing the literature review, going back to the triangles, right? When you're reading a lot of sources in the literature, and depending on what your topic is, sometimes you want to organize all of your research in the literature review in different ways, depending. You might take a chronological organization to it. If the research kind of developed and evolved over time, you might talk about earlier research and then how it evolved and more recent research. You might want to organize your literature review in terms of methodology. So maybe there are lots of researchers who use an experimental design to investigate a certain question. Others use a quasi-experimental design. Some use different measures, and so you find different results depending on the type of design or the type of measures. So you can organize your literature review in different ways, right, as you're telling that story. So here's where, if you keep an Excel spreadsheet and you're going to kind of jot down what are the methods used, what are the measures used, that could also help you at a glance then figure out how you want to kind of organize your story. So another example of this, just on this slide, is I had a student a couple years back who was doing a systematic literature review on cross-age interventions, peer tutoring interventions. And so she created a spreadsheet. This is just a little piece of it, a little screenshot on what the articles were and the different variables that we were interested in, like the age of the participants, the type of intervention used. And that way she could then very easily like sort the Excel file and kind of organize it in different ways to see how she wanted to tell the story. Okay, so there are lots of different ways like that you can organize information, and as you're amassing lots of information, right? So just some tips there. I don't know if you have any other thoughts on how to organize information.
So this is similar to like
Is there a way we can get a copy? Oh. Go ahead.
I don't know who was talking first. I'm sorry.
Oh no, it's fine. You can go first.
Who was it?
Is
Val?
there a way to get a copy of these slides?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'll make sure they're shareable wherever they're storing all of the information from the workshops. Absolutely. So I'll have them
Thank
uploaded.
you.
Yep, absolutely. Yep. Sure. And they have all the references at the back too, all the worksheets and websites. So, yep.
No, so what I was just saying is that this is similar to a synthesis matrix.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Have you used that before?
Yeah, in one of my classes, those because it was helping like with figuring out like the different themes that you may look for coding or whatnot.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Like if you're doing qualitative analyses, absolutely. Yeah, so it's very similar to that. Yeah, so you can create your own system very similar to that. Absolutely. Yep. Yeah, very good. Um, I know earlier in the week, I think it was on Monday, they talked about citation managers, right? So I don't know, were you all in that one as well?
Yes.
Several of you, yeah. So was very informative. I happen to use Mendeley, so this is just a screenshot of what mine kind of looks like. So keep losing my mouse. So these are my collections, so to speak, or folders. I have a textbook that I co-author, so every time I do a new edition of the textbook, I add all of my PDFs in there, and it's really, really helpful because it keeps everything organized. And then if you have a plugin in Microsoft Word, you can generate your in-text citations and your reference citations as well. I know they talked about Zotero as well. I hear that that's a more powerful citation manager. I'm on Twitter or X, and the people I follow say, "Oh, you got to move to Zotero." This was about a year or so ago. You got to move to Zotero. And I was like, I'm not switching, only because I've used one for so long. I'm that inertia of like, I'm not going to switch. So I still use Mendeley, but I hear Zotero is better. But definitely, go back to that webinar, take a look at, the resources there, and take a look at those. They're really, really helpful, and they save a lot of time. Sometimes there are minor errors in your reference citations. They're not perfect, but it saves a lot of time. And if you know your APA format or MLA or whatever you use, you can just go in and correct it, pretty easily. So I recommend this to my students. Any citation manager, but that's the one I use. Yeah. So, and then, my final thoughts, I guess my advice to you and is it's a journey. Okay, so we started out a little while ago, talking about this big fuzzy concept that, hopefully we kind of shape and mold into a strong and feasible research question, and we dive into the literature. And how do we do that? We read a lot and we write a lot, using annotated bibliographies or, different types of organizational systems. So it is a process, especially the revising part of it. So I wanted to just impart that on you as well. When I have a thesis student, even if they come to me with a very well thought out idea and maybe have researched it, already, we will go through 5, maybe 6 revisions, until I say it's good to go to committee, right? And you have to embrace that, right? Revision is a process, and every revision makes your ideas clearer, makes your methodology clearer, and it gets you closer and closer and closer to that very, very refined question that started out as that lump of clay. So try not to get frustrated and discouraged. It's meant to kind of make the best product possible and get you, to completion. So embrace, I was going to say welcome it, but nobody welcomes all of the revision. But embrace it at least, and realize it's all part of the process, and it makes us all better writers to do that. So like we said at the beginning, thesis dissertation, typically a year, if not within a semester, but typically takes a year. Get organized, be organized, do your reading, do your writing, keep a schedule, but also know that life happens. Okay. And take time for that, right? So take time for birthday parties, graduations, someone might get ill, you know, you have to take time for the things that are happening in your life. So if you stay organized, that you could always set the thesis or dissertation aside, deal with what's happening in your life, and then get back to it. And it's not the end of the world, you know, if you don't finish within a year's time. So take time to enjoy life and don't be consumed all by the thesis. Okay, that's kind of my thought. Okay. So I'm wondering, we are wrapping up. I'm wondering if what questions you have, and or if you have specific thoughts on specific things you would want to see in the future, right? Different webinars. So anything specific that you can think of. And if you don't at this point, you know, definitely
For
we
me,
can.
I just
Yeah.
had that one question about seeing if we could do just a small tutorial on how to access ProQuest.
Okay. Let me see if I can find it. I don't know, Tess, if you can help me out with that. So, and I will also stop sharing. So let me do that too.
Unless you search for ProQuest.
Yeah,
With
we can
it.
do that. Yep. Okay, there we go. All right. So
So you'll have to share with us so we can see.
I will. Yeah.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
let's search for ProQuest first. And, let me see if I can get in the general area. Can't type. Okay, so
I found
Let
it
me
if you
know.
didn't yet.
yep, I did. So
Okay.
let me now share. You're faster than I am. So okay, let me now share. Well, I started at the grad page,
Oh,
and I thought that was maybe a good place to start for everyone.
oh, so that's where they submit it, but he was
Okay.
wanting to, here, let me share, okay?
Sure, absolutely. Let me stop sharing.
So here's the main library page that you go to.
Mm-hmm.
If you come to popular databases, it's not on the short list, but if you go to view more results and then go to P, there are the ProQuest right there.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, great. Oh, were we going to look at one?
Oh,
Or
did you
do-
want to? I'm sorry.
Do you want to just, yeah, let's just see, you know, quickly. I know
Oh,
we're
yeah.
nearing the end, so.
Okay, so here's dissertations and theses.
Mm-hmm.
And then I wonder if you can search,
Hmm.
I'll search counseling.
Yes, good one. Yeah.
And so here, you could do a search within that for more specific for things, topics that you're interested in. But even if you just open
Mm-hmm.
one of these, you'll see how it's structured. And so, yeah,
Mhm.
this is how our first page is just like that. Our abstract page is a little bit different than that. You'll have a table of contents. If you come on Friday morning, we'll be working on setting up the structure like this.
Yeah, that's great.
So this one, we've got an introduction. Oh, so this is increasingly there are disciplines that are having students write articles instead of
Mm-hmm.
book type theses, and so this looks like one of the article type ones.
Yeah, so that might be a little confusing.
Yeah. Contraceptive counseling, that would be interesting.
Mhm.
The thesis abstract, acknowledgements, table of contents,
Mhm.
statement of purpose, methods, results, discussion. So exactly the structure that Cheryl was talking about.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
So
I also would direct you to the graduate school page. Down near the bottom, they do have links to sample documents just in terms of formatting. So if you were
yes,
interested in that, it's just to see if I can share my screen again.
and it'll show you exactly how to do the title page and how to do the abstract, because our abstract is different than what we were just seeing.
Right. So right here you have the title page. You have a sample. So if we just go to this sample here, right, you can kind of follow along in terms of the format. Okay, you don't necessarily need the copyright page, but there's your there's your abstract page. You can have a dedication. You can have an acknowledgements. There's your table of contents, a very basic one, but you can follow that and expand on it. And then you have list of figures, list of tables, and then it will say chapter 1 introduction. And it even gives you, if you're following APA, the APA level headings. So on the School of Graduate and Professional Studies page, you'll get links to those, formatting pages. So that's helpful as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, awesome. So that's all I have. If you have no questions, I thank you very much for joining us, and hope you have a good rest of the evening. And you can email me if you have any questions, and I'll be glad to direct you to someone who can answer questions if I can't. It's Durwin c1@southernct.edu. So I'm happy to, and if you have suggestions for other topics over the summer, not necessarily me, but anyone else who can address those topics, you can email me and I'll definitely get it to others and who are planning it. Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
everybody.
so much
All
for
right.
taking the
Cheryl.
time.
So now I
All
get
right.
to go on a Zoom. I've been
Oh,
on WebEx and now I've been on Teams and now I'm
WebEx,
going on
Teams,
a
and now
Zoom.
Zoom. So you got them
Now
all.
a Zoom. So
Yes. Well, have a
yeah,
good night and stay
thank you.
dry.
You
All
too.
right.
Thank you.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
everybody.
you.